Every single day, America throws away more than 700,000 tons of trash. Most people never think about where it goes. They drag a garbage can to the curb, the truck picks it up, and by the next morning, it's completely forgotten. But what if I told you that every single garbage bag starts a journey that can make someone money? What if I told you that some of the biggest fortunes in America aren't built on technology, real estate, or oil, but on garbage? It sounds ridiculous at first. After all, who would ever dream of owning a landfill? It's dirty. It smells. Nobody wants to live next to one. And yet, hidden behind mountains of trash is one of the most profitable infrastructure businesses in the United States. So, you want to own a landfill. At first glance, a landfill looks like the end of the story. Trucks arrive, dump their waste, bulldozers spread it across the ground, and that's it. But that's exactly what makes this business so fascinating. A modern landfill isn't just a giant hole filled with garbage. It's a carefully engineered facility with environmental protection systems, drainage networks, methane gas collection, recycling operations, and long-term government oversight. In fact, building a landfill can take years of planning, environmental studies, engineering approvals, and millions, sometimes hundreds of millions of dollars before the first truck ever arrives. That means the real business isn't collecting trash. The real business is controlling one of the most valuable pieces of infrastructure every city depends on. Now think about this for a moment. Every household creates waste. Every restaurant creates waste. Every hospital, shopping mall, factory, school, airport, and office building creates waste every single day. And none of them can simply stop producing it. Whether the economy is booming or in recession, people continue eating, shopping, working, and throwing things away. That makes waste disposal one of the few industries with constant demand, regardless of economic conditions. While other businesses worry about finding customers, landfill operators wake up every morning knowing that thousands of trucks will keep arriving because society literally can't function without them. And that's why some of America's largest waste companies have quietly built multi-billion-dollar businesses around something everyone else is desperate to get rid of. The question is, how does a pile of garbage turn into a machine that prints money? The answer begins long before the trash is buried. Every time a garbage truck enters a landfill, it doesn't simply dump its load and drive away. It pays to enter. This is called a tipping fee, and it's the foundation of the entire business. Whether the truck belongs to a city, a private waste hauler, or a construction company, the landfill operator charges a fee based on the weight or type of waste being delivered. In many parts of the United States, tipping fees can range from around $30 to well over $100 per ton, depending on the location, available landfill capacity, and local regulations. That means a single truck carrying 20 tons of waste could generate hundreds or even thousands of dollars in revenue before the garbage ever touches the ground. Multiply that by hundreds of trucks arriving every day, and suddenly a landfill starts looking less like a dump and more like a toll booth that never closes. But here's what makes the business even more powerful. Unlike most companies that constantly chase new customers, landfill operators often sign long-term contracts with cities, counties, businesses, and waste collection companies. These agreements can last for years, creating predictable cash flow that investors love. Every morning, fleets of garbage trucks follow the same routes, serving the same neighborhoods, restaurants, factories, and office buildings before ending their journey at the same landfill. The operator doesn't have to convince people to create waste. It happens automatically. As long as communities exist, garbage keeps coming. That's why the waste industry is considered one of the most recession-resistant sectors in the American economy. People may delay buying a new car or cancel a vacation during tough times, but they don't stop producing trash. And then there's something most people never notice. A landfill has limited space. Every ton of garbage placed inside uses up part of an asset that can never be replaced once it's full. That means operators carefully manage capacity, expand sites when possible, and invest heavily in engineering to maximize the usable life of each landfill. In many regions, getting approval to build a new landfill is incredibly difficult because of environmental regulations, zoning restrictions, and local opposition. As a result, existing landfills become incredibly valuable assets with very little competition nearby. In business, that's called an economic moat, a competitive advantage that's difficult for others to copy. And once you understand that, another fascinating question appears. If burying trash already makes billions of dollars, what happens when you stop treating garbage as waste and start treating it as a valuable resource? That's where the landfill business becomes far more interesting than most people realize. Because modern landfills don't simply bury everything they receive. Before much of that waste reaches its final destination, valuable materials are often recovered and sold. Aluminum, steel, copper, cardboard, plastics, electronics, and even construction debris can all be separated, processed, and turned back into profitable commodities. In other words, what one company throws away, another company is willing to buy. That's why many of America's largest landfill operators have invested heavily in recycling facilities, creating a second revenue stream that exists alongside traditional waste disposal. They're not just managing garbage anymore, they're managing raw materials. Take cardboard as an example. Every day, thousands of retailers, warehouses, and distribution centers generate enormous amounts of used cardboard. Instead of burying it, recycling facilities compress it into massive bales and sell it to paper manufacturers that turn it into new boxes and packaging. The same thing happens with metals. Scrap steel and aluminum recovered from discarded appliances, construction waste, and consumer products can be melted down and reused, often making recycled metal far cheaper than mining and refining new material. Even certain plastics can be cleaned, sorted, and processed into pellets that manufacturers use to create entirely new products. Suddenly, a landfill stops looking like the end of a product's life and starts looking like the beginning of another industry's supply chain. And that's exactly why the biggest companies in this business don't describe themselves as landfill operators anymore. They call themselves environmental services companies. Their goal isn't simply to bury waste. It's to extract as much value from it as possible before anything reaches the ground. The less they bury, and the more they recover, the more efficient and profitable the operation becomes. But here's where the business takes another surprising turn. Even after every recyclable material has been removed, the remaining trash still has one more hidden asset buried inside it. An asset powerful enough to generate electricity for thousands of homes. And believe it or not, that invisible resource is created by the garbage itself. Every piece of organic waste buried inside a landfill, food scraps, paper, wood, and yard waste slowly decomposes over time. As it breaks down without oxygen, it produces a powerful greenhouse gas called methane. Left uncontrolled, methane escapes into the atmosphere, where it's far more effective at trapping heat than carbon dioxide over the short term. For decades, this gas was simply considered an environmental problem. But then, someone asked a billion-dollar question. What if we could capture it instead of wasting it? That single idea transformed modern landfills from waste disposal sites into energy-producing facilities. Today, many large landfills across the United States operate sophisticated landfill gas recovery systems. Hundreds of underground wells collect methane gas and transport it through pipelines to processing equipment. From there, the gas can be cleaned and used to generate electricity, fuel industrial boilers, or even be upgraded into renewable natural gas, RNG, that powers buses, garbage trucks, and commercial vehicle fleets. In many cases, local utility companies purchase this electricity and feed it directly into the power grid. Think about that for a moment. Yesterday's garbage can literally become tomorrow's electricity. A business that was already earning money from accepting waste suddenly creates an entirely new revenue stream from the same pile of trash. That's one of the most remarkable examples of asset optimization you'll find in any industry. But the story doesn't end there. Capturing methane doesn't just create energy. It can also create intergeniate and can also create environmental value. By preventing methane from escaping into the atmosphere, landfill operators may qualify for environmental incentives or generate additional value through renewable energy markets, depending on the project and regulations. That's why the biggest players in the industry no longer think of themselves as landfill companies. They think of themselves as infrastructure, recycling, and renewable energy companies operating under one roof. And that's exactly why firms like Waste Management, Republic Services, and Waste Connections have spent billions of dollars expanding beyond simple waste collection. Because once you realize a landfill can generate income from tipping fees, recycling, energy production, and environmental projects, you begin to understand why Wall Street doesn't see a mountain of garbage. It sees one of the most resilient cash flow businesses in America. But if this business is so profitable, who are the companies that dominate it? And how did they build multi-billion-dollar empires from something everyone else wanted to throw away? The answer starts with three names that quietly control a massive portion of America's waste industry: Waste Management, WM, Republic Services, and Waste Connections. These companies don't simply own landfills. They operate nationwide networks of garbage trucks, recycling centers, transfer stations, renewable energy projects, and disposal facilities that serve millions of homes and businesses every single week. Together, they generate tens of billions of dollars in annual revenue, making the waste industry one of the largest infrastructure sectors in North America. What's fascinating is that none of these companies became giants by inventing a revolutionary new product. They became giants by mastering a service that society can never stop using. Take Waste Management, the largest waste company in North America. Every morning, thousands of its green trucks leave their depots before sunrise. They collect residential waste, commercial garbage, industrial materials, and construction debris before transporting it through a carefully designed network of transfer stations and landfills. The company isn't earning money just once. It gets paid for collecting the waste, transporting the waste, recycling valuable materials, disposing of the remaining trash, and in many locations, even turning landfill gas into renewable energy. That's multiple revenue streams generated from the exact same customer. In business, that's called vertical integration, and it's one of the reasons these companies consistently produce strong and predictable cash flow year after year. But perhaps their greatest competitive advantage isn't their trucks or even their landfills. It's their scale. Building a new landfill today is incredibly difficult. Environmental permits can take years. Communities often oppose new projects. Land costs continue to rise, and regulatory requirements become stricter every year. As a result, existing landfill operators enjoy one of the strongest economic moats in modern infrastructure. The larger they become, the harder it is for new competitors to challenge them. That's exactly why investors often compare major waste companies to utilities rather than ordinary service businesses. They provide an essential service, operate under high barriers to entry, generate recurring revenue, and own irreplaceable infrastructure. But despite all those strengths, this industry still faces challenges that could threaten profitability. Because running a landfill isn't just about making money, it's also about managing enormous environmental responsibility. And that's exactly why the landfill business has one of the highest barriers to entry in America. Anyone can buy a piece of land. Almost nobody can turn it into a licensed landfill. Before a single truck is allowed through the gate, operators must complete years of environmental studies, groundwater testing, engineering design, public hearings, zoning approvals, and state and federal permitting. Even after a landfill opens, it remains under constant monitoring. Operators must manage leachate, the liquid that forms when rainwater passes through waste, protect nearby groundwater, monitor methane emissions, control odors, and maintain the site for decades after it eventually closes. In other words, this isn't simply a garbage business. It's an environmental infrastructure business governed by some of the strictest regulations in the country. Those responsibilities are expensive, but they also create a powerful competitive advantage. Because obtaining approval for a new landfill is so difficult, existing facilities become incredibly valuable. Imagine trying to build an airport in the middle of a major city today. The engineering might be possible, but getting public approval would be the real challenge. Landfills face the same problem. Most communities want reliable waste disposal, but very few people want a landfill built near their homes. This phenomenon is often called "not in my backyard" or NIMBY. As a result, existing landfill operators face very little new competition. The scarcity of permitted landfill space allows many companies to maintain pricing power over the long term, making their assets even more valuable as nearby capacity becomes harder to replace. And that's exactly why many professional investors see the waste industry as more than just a collection of garbage sites. They see essential infrastructure with durable competitive advantages. While technology companies race to invent the next breakthrough, and retailers fight for customers every day, Landfill operators benefit from something much simpler. Society produces waste every single day, regardless of economic conditions. That's why companies like Waste Management, Republic Services, and Waste Connections have attracted long-term investors who value steady cash flow over flashy growth. But no business is perfect. Even an industry built on constant demand faces risks that could reshape its future. So before you decide whether owning a landfill is a dream investment or a terrible idea, there's one side of this business almost nobody talks about: the risks that could turn a billion-dollar asset into a billion-dollar liability. Every successful business has hidden risks, and the landfill industry is no exception. One environmental violation, a leaking liner, groundwater contamination, or failure to properly manage methane emissions can result in millions of dollars in cleanup costs, regulatory penalties, and legal action. Unlike many businesses that simply close their doors when profits decline, landfill operators remain responsible for a site long after it stops accepting waste. In many cases, companies must continue monitoring groundwater, maintaining gas collection systems, and protecting the environment for 30 years or more after a landfill closes. That's a financial obligation many people never consider when they imagine this business. There's also another challenge that's quietly reshaping the industry: the future of waste itself. Governments, businesses, and consumers are recycling more, reducing packaging, and investing in circular economy initiatives designed to keep valuable materials out of landfills. At first, that sounds like bad news. Less trash should mean less business, right? Surprisingly, the largest companies don't see it that way. Instead of resisting change, they've embraced it. They're investing billions of dollars into advanced recycling, renewable natural gas, sustainability projects, and resource recovery technologies. They understand a simple truth: the future isn't about burying more garbage, it's about extracting more value from every ton of waste. Once again, the biggest winners aren't the companies that refuse to change. They're the ones that evolve before the market forces them to. And that's the lesson hidden beneath every mountain of trash. A landfill isn't really a garbage business at all. It's a logistics business, an infrastructure business, a renewable energy business, a recycling business, and a real estate business, all operating at the same time. That's why the world's smartest investors don't judge it by appearance. They judge it by recurring cash flow, long-term contracts, irreplaceable assets, and the ability to adapt as technology and environmental standards continue to evolve. Which brings us to one final question. After everything you've learned today, if someone offered you the opportunity to own one of America's largest landfills, would you see a mountain of garbage or a mountain of opportunity? Before you answer that, there's one final business lesson that every entrepreneur should hear. Most people look at a landfill and see the end of a product's life. An entrepreneur sees the beginning of a new business cycle. A city sees waste management. An environmental engineer sees resource recovery. An energy company sees renewable fuel. And an investor sees something even more valuable: a business with recurring demand that society can never completely eliminate. That's the difference between simply looking at an industry and truly understanding it. The world's greatest entrepreneurs don't become wealthy because they discover magical businesses. They become wealthy because they recognize hidden value where everyone else sees problems. That's exactly why industries like waste management, water utilities, cemeteries, self-storage, railroads, and recycling have quietly created billions of dollars in shareholder value without ever becoming glamorous. So, you want to own a landfill? If your answer is yes, simply because you heard it's a multi-billion-dollar business, then you're asking the wrong question. But if your answer is yes because you now understand tipping fees, long-term municipal contracts, recycling operations, renewable natural gas, landfill gas-to-energy projects, environmental compliance, and the power of recurring cash flow, then you finally understood what this business is really about. A landfill doesn't make money because it stores garbage. It makes money because it manages one of society's most essential services while turning waste into valuable assets. That's why the biggest companies in this industry aren't just landfill operators anymore. They're environmental infrastructure companies, building businesses that can last for generations. And perhaps that's the biggest lesson hidden beneath every pile of trash. The most profitable businesses often solve problems that nobody else wants to solve. Technology changes. Consumer trends come and go. But every single day, people will continue producing waste. Cities will continue needing safe disposal. Businesses will continue needing recycling. Energy companies will continue looking for cleaner fuel sources. That's why this industry has continued to grow decade after decade, quietly creating enormous wealth for the companies that learn how to manage it efficiently. The next time you drive past a landfill, don't just see trucks, bulldozers, and mountains of garbage. See billions of dollars in infrastructure, renewable energy projects, environmental engineering, long-term government partnerships, and one of America's most overlooked business models. Because sometimes the greatest fortunes aren't built from what people want, they're built from what people throw away. If you enjoyed this deep dive into one of America's most overlooked industries, subscribe to Money Blueprint. We break down the hidden business models behind the companies, industries, and infrastructure that quietly power the American economy, so you don't just learn where money is made, you learn how money actually works.